أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. It's my pleasure to be here for these 12 days. We've recently moved to Dearborn. My family and I, we came back from home last September or so. We moved to Dearborn, and so it's been just over a year that we've been there. But it's nice to see other communities, especially other growing communities. This evening I was blessed. I looked outside the window where I was staying, and I saw the moon for Muharram. So it was a great thing to see. It's a sunnah. If you get a chance at the beginning of the month, the 28th, 29th night of each month, go out and look at the horizon and see. Just around Maghrib time, a little bit after Maghrib time, that's when you can see it. It was around 6:03 today that I saw it. We have two purposes that we can kind of get out of this experience that we have together. There are two things I really want to focus on through these lectures that I'm going to be giving to you. One purpose of these lectures in Muharram is to try to make Imam Hussein and everything about him part of the fabric of our lives. And the way we do that is by recounting his life, going through his life. And his life, the part where he was an active Imam is all around Karbala, leading up to Karbala, during Karbala, and then the aftermath of Karbala. That's part of our goal, and part of the one of the goals that I want to try to accomplish in these lectures. And inshallah, I want to do that by presenting to you translations of Masa'ib towards the end. What I like to do is to narrate stories from different people throughout the whole event of Karbala. Not necessarily on the battlefield. There are a lot of people died besides the people who died on the battlefield. But inshallah, I'm going to share with you different biographies of people, different stories of the death of different people. And inshallah, through that process, we can start to, or hopefully continue, building this fabric of our own lives, this cultural kind of understanding of who Imam Hussein is, and make that part of our own personalities, our own lives. Another goal, the second goal that I have, that I want to try to pursue during these lectures, is to try to actually carry on this torch that Imam Hussein was bearing. He had a stated mission for which he was doing what he did. And I think it's very feasible for us to take that torch that he left lit and to carry it on. And that mission is encapsulated in a statement that he made. As he's leaving Medina and going to Mecca, he says the following statement. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was to his brother Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. He says, "Inni lam akhruj dhatiran wala ashiran wala mufsidan wala zaliman wa innama kharajtu atlubu as-salaha fi ummati jaddi Muhammad. Uridu an amura bil ma'ruf wa anha 'anil munkar wa asira bi sirati jaddi wa sirati abi Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam." He said, "I do not rise against Yazid in insolence or in arrogance, or to cause mischief or to wrong anyone. I only rise up to bring reform to the community of my grandfather Muhammad. I wish to enjoin good and forbid evil, and to live according to the example of my grandfather and the example of my father Ali ibn Abi Talib." One of the goals that Imam Hussein himself had in his mind as he was doing what he did, as he left Medina, went to Mecca, and from Mecca headed to Kufa, was that he wanted to reform the ummah. He saw things that were happening that shouldn't have been happening, And he wanted to do something to change that, to bring about a revolution in the minds of people, and to change the wrongs that he saw. The crisis of his time was a deterioration of the teaching of the Prophet and the Sunnah of the Prophet and the two Imams before him. Society had basically reverted, maybe even become worse than it was when the Prophet first came. Even worse than the Jahiliyyah was what Yazid had created around him. And so because of this downward spiral that he saw the Ummah in, right, he saw that he needed to do something. He felt there's a crisis, and to deal with this crisis, he did what he did. My contention is that this crisis isn't finished. By the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, the crisis didn't somehow magically get solved. He succeeded in his goal in stopping the downward spiral and making some improvements. He was effective in some ways, but we shouldn't think that the crisis is over and there's no crisis left, and we can simply remember this as a historical event and not take any lesson from that for who we are, what we're doing right now today. My contention is that the crisis continues. The crises surrounding us in every part of our lives. The political crisis around the world is maybe the forefront of our minds. And we look around and everywhere there's just governments doing rotten things to its people, in Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries. Muslim rulers oppressing their Muslim subjects, non-Muslims crossing borders and imprisoning, bombarding Muslims. All over the place we see there's a political crisis. Even on the home front, we shouldn't think that because things are comfortable, there's no crisis there. Sometimes crises can be under the rug and not really perceptible unless you really think about it. The economic crisis is definitely there, surrounding us. I don't know how hard it's hit down here, but in Michigan it's terrible. In other places around the country there's an economic crisis. Worldwide they say there's a food shortage. Sometimes you wouldn't know it to see our own pantries and our own refrigerators. But there are other places around the world that they're not able to find the basic staples. Maybe one of the worst crises that we face right now is an educational crisis. And I think this might be fundamental to all the other crises that we have. A crisis of knowledge, or a crisis of a lack thereof, a lack of knowledge. What I find is that I think it's not a new observation, but what I think it's obvious to all of us is that Muslims in general lack the basic literacy that they need of their religion to fulfill their own duties to God. And that's Muslims, an educational crisis amongst Muslims, not to mention non-Muslims who haven't even been exposed to Islam properly. And I think this is a crisis that we have to deal with. What Imam Hussein did was he saw the crisis, and then he saw that there's something he could do about it to stop it, and then to possibly turn the tides and improve the situation of the Ummah. I think we can do the same thing. We must do the same thing. If we're going to get beyond just remembering something that happened in history and is sealed in history, and make Karbala alive now and learn something, carry on that message and that mission, then we have to do something to address the crises that we see around us. I think amongst all these crises that I mentioned, the most fundamental one, the cornerstone, and maybe the thing that could, if we change this one thing, everything else could fall into place, or at least would there be hope for the other things falling into place, would be to address this crisis of education. And the way to address that is to first educate our